the sacred seal of persistence, decoding the enigma of why the melanated spirit appears untouched while the tempest rages all around. Enter this hallowed ground of absolute clarity, a space where we strip away the calluses of antiquity and ether to graze the pulsating heart of our collective existence. In this sacred juncture, we conjure a revelation to dismantle the grand deception, the empty fable whispering that our kin can traverse the inferno without the scent of smoke clinging to our robes. Why does the cosmos perceive only a silent, steady advance? Is this truly the celestial plating of fortitude, or is it a laceration so profound that it mimics the stillness of serenity? Heed the murmurs of the ancient ones. The agony is tangible, the gashes are weeping. It is time to draw back the veil on the engine of destruction, grinding endlessly in the shadows. Let the great undoing begin. A miasma is settling upon the consciousness of the masses, a treacherous doctrine suggesting the turmoil of this epoch somehow bypasses our thresholds. They query why our boulevards do not overflow with our righteous fury. They marvel at how we proceed, placing one foot before the other, as if the firmament itself were not crumbling down. Has this venom found its way to your hearing? If so, align your frequency to this vibration, for I articulate mysteries concealed within the open light of day. Such a perspective is a blinder, an optical illusion crafted to render our tribulation transparent and our heavy yokes seemingly weightless. It functions as a burial cloth, masking the parasites, devouring the foundational pillars of our being, even as the temple slowly disintegrates. I manifest here to vocalize the unsaid. The hurricane howls within the ribcage. We bleed, we fracture, and we register every seismic shift of this trembling terrain. The divergence is rooted in an archaic wisdom inscribed upon our double helix. We awakened eons ago to the truth that no celestial chariot arrives to rescue us, and the citadels of dominion rarely unbar their gates for righteousness. We comprehended that the blueprints of this realm were drafted with barriers intended to restrain us, demanding a resilience from our spirits that no mortal vessel should ever be compelled to house. Consequently, we enacted a miracle of the soul. We alchemized our anguish into endurance, mastering the art of respiration beneath the crushing waves. Yet, this invulnerability exacts a horrific tribute. There are specters that feast upon this quietude, dark forces that gorge themselves when the world is convinced we possess no capacity for pain. The apparatus of subjugation lubricates its cogs in the hush, gathering potency when our odyssey is scrubbed from the universal mind. From the zeniths of governance to the shrines of mercantilism and counterfeit havens, a synchronized endeavor exists to keep the blinders fastened tight. Upon this day, we identify the entities maneuvering in the gloom. They have murmured to you that the melanated essence is adamantine, a wellspring that never runs dry. They chant hymns of our boundless elasticity, proclaiming we require no mending because, allegedly, we sustain no injuries. But I arrive carrying a burdensome veracity to raise that altar. Our persistence is not the child of some supernatural exemption from harm. It is the hardened skin developed over 4 centuries of traversing the blast furnace, a navigational chart etched in plasma and brine. Do not laud a soul for surviving the executioner's blade. To label this as fortitude is to gild a gaping wound. It is a mechanism to sanctify the scar so one may disregard the sword that carved it. The potentates desire this mirage of indestructibility so they may sever the arteries of sustenance without a single tremor of the moral compass. They require you to accept that we are hewn from granite, enabling them to legislate the crushing of bone without dreading the resonance of the lamentation. They yearn to reap the harvest of our toil and the currency of our grief, all while cleansing their palms of the very earth they have poisoned. Now, In the year of the Creator 2026, beneath the scrutiny of the present regime, this catastrophe unfolds before our mortal gaze. The spectre of stagnation has expanded, with the rate of joblessness for our kin ascending to 7.5%. This rises as a colossal obelisk, overshadowing the national median of 4.3%. As recorded in the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies' State of the Dream Report for 2026, this is not merely script on parchment. It serves as a prophetic harbinger of a specific financial winter that has descended upon our crowns. The glaciations bite most savagely into the marrow of our progeny and those in the zenith of their vigor, while our ancients are compelled to labor into their twilight epochs merely to stem the rising tide. I materialize as a testament to direct the digit of reckoning toward the origin. I cast light upon the duplicity of rulers who weave exquisite fantasies during the season of ballot harvesting, only to sow briars in our pastures once they mount the throne. I unmask the chroniclers who water down our calamity and the tabernacles that preach affliction as a holy right, bartering our mute endurance for their terrestrial dominion. And I summon every spirit who dares to proclaim the seas are tranquil when the floodwaters are cresting at our throats, a willful blindness to the omens of the age. This is no trivial exchange of viewpoints in the civic forum. This transcends the hollow charades of political theatrics. We speak of the very air in our lungs, the sustenance upon our boards, and the fundamental right to be in a cosmos that hungers to devour us. This is the crusade for the consciousness of our descendants and the vitality of our patriarchs and matriarchs, who dissolve because the price of restoration has eclipsed the price of refuge. It concerns the life force crying out from the pavement, spilled by centurions who depart without a blemish on their souls. It concerns the muffling of our utterance at the polling station and the ultimate query of whether we shall endure as a people or be expunged from the annals of time. The narrative they spin that we are unscathed is the blade they wield to diminish us. It is a hexed whisper asserting your torment is of no significance. It is the falsehood that deposits the gravity of the structure's collapse squarely upon your own fatigued clavicles. They profess that tribulation is merely the birthright of our hue, a chalice we must sip from everlastingly. But this day we shatter that vessel against the ramparts. No further. In this instant your vision shall be unsealed to the exact character of the briars tearing at our flesh. You will discern the computed statutes, the architected systems, and the precision strikes unfolding in this very hour. You will witness that disorder is not the architect here. This is intelligent design. This is malevolence with an objective. And truly, it is a trial prophesied in the holy texts. But before we graze that divine epiphany, there is a bedrock reality you must comprehend. You crave a vision of such piercing luminosity that the mere thought of denying the truth dissolves like mist before the morning sun. Your spirit hunts for the solid bedrock of existence, the irrefutable stones of reality, and it is this very curtain of illusion that I intend to tear asunder for you this day. Steel your soul for a seismic transformation of awareness, for the prophecies I utter are not whispers from a hazy tomorrow, but the roaring thunder of a tempest that has already blackened our skies. We do not peer into the swirling mists of a diviner's orb to guess at what might be. Nay, we stand witness to the inexorable unrolling of a doom that has already been inscribed by mortal hands. There lies a grim grimoire of 900 heavy pages, a dark covenant named Project 2026, which maps a ruthless geography of ruin for every fortress we have raised, every lifeline we cherish, and every sacred freedom our forebears shed their blood to consecrate. As we draw breath in this current year of 2026, the rusted iron wheels of this malevolent mechanism are already turning, grinding ominously beneath the very floorboards of the seats of power. This design looses a poisoned shaft directly at the core of our enlightenment, striving to dismantle the federal sentinels of wisdom with a chilling and calculated precision. It heralds the obliteration of the holy measures that guarantee the river of gold and vital resources flows into the scholastic sanctuaries of our sun-kissed communities. The chalices of fairness are upturned and emptied, abandoning our youth to wither in a barren wasteland of want, offering them dry dust where there should be banquet tables laden with knowledge. But the tendrils of this wickedness delve into the earth far deeper than mere neglect. Project 2026 cries out for the absolute annihilation of the department itself. Halt your spirit and permit the crushing gravity of that void to rest upon your shoulders. The very guardian, tasked with balancing the scales of righteousness within our halls of learning, would vanish into the abyss, vanished utterly. This signifies that the ancient ghosts of separation may rise from their shallow tombs, liberated to stalk our children once more without the dread of judgment or federal retribution. Then the encroaching twilight descends upon the people's nourishment, striking at the very grain that graces our tables and sustains our blood. Though one soul in every 8 leans upon this staff of life, the yoke presses hardest upon our own kin. This dark scroll seeks to sever the benevolent hand that feeds, slashing the covenant with a blade of utter cruelty. They plot to cast this burden back onto lands tainted by a heritage of exclusion, raising impenetrable ramparts where there ought to be welcoming gates for the weary traveler. Their desire is to wither the harvest, ensuring the bellies of the innocent cry out in hunger while mothers and fathers stand empty-handed in the gloom, unable to provide. Kinships shall be driven into the torment of choosing between the bread that sustains the body and the medicine that preserves the breath, as the scroll of sorrow unfurls to display the purging of healers for the multitudes. The halls of civil defense are gutted and left hollow, leaving no ear to hearken to your lament, and no hand to lift you when the scourge of prejudice strikes your spirit. The endeavors crafted to level the ground and honor the tapestry of our diversity are washed away, casting us back into a frigid wilderness devoid of shelter or shield. Even the sentinels of justice are disarmed of their steel, leaving the enforcers of the law answerable to no earthly power, free to prowl the land without a shadow of accountability. Do not be beguiled into believing this is a rumor whispered in the shadows. It is bellowed from the highest peaks, a published creed of those who grip the reins of your fate in this very hour. Gaze upon the skeletal framework of their malice. Here lies the master plan of the tempest they are conjuring from the deep to overwhelm us. You shall see it take form in the moons and years ahead, strand by agonizing strand, precisely as I foretell, yet understand that the pilfering of bread and books is but the opening verse of this tragedy. Permit me to shed light on how they endeavor to pulverize the very hearthstones of our homes, to shatter our power, to erect a kingdom for the generations that follow in our footsteps. The scrolls of passage that grant haven to the destitute, Section 8, are being methodically dissolved into the ether of non-existence. These are the fragile cords that permit millions of our families to discover sanctuary amidst the merciless markets of the world. The command has been issued that renewal is forbidden, and the sands of time are running out, granting our people a scant 60 suns to seek a new refuge before they are exiled to the unforgiving pavement. This calamity blooms in the eternal present, while the ancient sin of bias in our dwelling places is woven once more into the tapestry of the law. The guardians of equitable shelter are famine-struck and stripped of strength, emboldening the gatekeepers of earth and stone to turn their backs upon us with supreme impunity. The prejudice in the lending of gold is cast into the shadows of ignorance, and the fruit is the tragic decline of home ownership among our people. The construction of dynastic legacies grinds to a halt, and the abyss of wealth expands into a canyon no bridge can span, Then follows the siege upon the creators and merchants of our tribe. The agency that irrigates the seedlings of our enterprise is being severed from its source, choking the flow to those who are forbidden to drink from the traditional wells of commerce. When this vital vein is cut, the dreamers and seers among us find themselves unable to birth their visions into the waking world. Our trade cannot flourish. Labors for our kin remain unborn, and the river of prosperity ceases to circulate through the arteries of our streets. The harvest is stolen away in the night, and even the recompense for the extra toil of the server is threatened by the butcher's knife. Our people stand resolute in these roles of service, yet fewer hours of acknowledged labor means the purse grows ever lighter in the hand. A purse devoid of weight signifies the sanctuary of the home is forfeited. Lanterns fade into darkness, debts mount like rising floodwaters, and families are cast out into the biting cold, stripped of every earthly belonging they once held dear. Do not be seduced into the belief that this is mere chance, or the accidental flotsam of a neutral governance drifting in the wind. This is a strike of divine precision, a spiritual and economic siege laid against the very soul of Black America to obliterate the path to salvation and earthly stability. This stands as the second pillar of testimony that the storm has arrived, altering our lives in this breathing instant. Now, bear witness to a horror even more shrouded in shadow. Project 2026 invokes a dark expansion of the law's iron gauntlet, demanding harsher dungeons and stretching the shadow of the executioner across the land. You must perceive the unvarnished truth of the chronicles. The blade of federal judgment has forever swung with a heavy prejudice against the necks of our accused. Decrees of mandatory confinement have always served to shatter our lineages and pulverize our families more thoroughly than any other earthly force. The ultimate penalty, the extinguishing of the sacred spark of life, has always been indelibly stained with the prejudice of skin. Thus, when Project 2026 wets these laws and widens the road to the gallows, harbor no doubt for a fleeting moment they know, with terrifying clarity, whose spirit they aim to crush. They possess a terrifying clarity that this heavy yoke crushes the spirits of the ebony kin most of all. But gaze deeper into the abyss, for a more sinister shadow is rising. The judgment of transgressions, once weighed in the town square, is being siphoned upward into the frigid, distant cathedrals of federal power. This signifies that the local arbiter, the prosecutor who treads the same soil and might harbor a single grain of mercy or wisdom, is rendered obsolete, completely bypassed by this leviathan of a machine. It means that the magistrates who dwell amongst the people, who recognize the weary faces of the accused, are stripped of their scepter. Consequently, the decrees of punishment become harder, unforgiving as the cold bedrock of the earth. And thus, dark bodies are condemned to wither behind cages of iron for seasons that stretch into eternity. Furthermore, we bear witness to the mounting siege against the sacred, blood-bought right to cast a voice in the ballot. A wicked alchemy is proposed to twist the very numbers of the census. This sorcery would render black lineages invisible to the gaze of the empire, thieving away our representation in the high councils and sapping our strength in the elections. Fortifications are being raised at the threshold of liberty identification edicts, strengthened to stifle the black cry, despite the undeniable revelation that these laws are merely rusted shackles painted in new colors. Even the holy act of benevolence is branded a crime. Those who would extend a guiding hand to lead the weary soul to the voting booth now face the thunderous wrath of federal indictment. This is nothing less than tyranny wearing the mask of safety. And now they speak in hushed tones of dismantling the consent decrees, the very shields that forced the watchmen to answer for their deeds. These are the same sacred covenants written in ink and tears after decades of blood were spilled by the brutality of the Guard in cities like Ferguson, like Chicago, like Baltimore. Behold, these treaties are being torn asunder, dismantled piece by phantom hands in the dark. The enforcers are unleashed without a master to check them. The violence rises like a dark tide. Accountability vanishes into the mist like morning dew. This stands as the third testament of their dark intent. The scales of justice are forged into a bludgeon against us. The holy right to speak our destiny through the vote is being obliterated from the earth. The guardians of the law wax strong in power, while the people are left naked before the storm. Do not be lulled into sleep. This is a calculated design. It is intentional, and it is unfolding in this very hour of 2026. Yet, a riddle remains here that the nations do not comprehend. Even as we behold these edicts, even as we watch the gears of our destruction turn, we do not wail into the void, as other tribes might. When the golden children of the empire face a gale, their lamentation shakes the pillars of heaven. They demand that the sovereign intervene. They expect the legions to ride to their salvation. And lo, the legions answer. But when the children of the diaspora face the hurricane, we carry an ancient secret that no rescuer is on the horizon. We know the state is not our Messiah. So, we turn our gaze inward. We adapt. We knit together a tapestry of community survival. We break bread together. We endure in the howling wilderness without waiting for a deliverance we know will never manifest from the outside. But let not our resilience be mistaken for invincibility. Do not look upon our ability to weather the storm and call it wholeness. It does not mean we do not bleed. It does not mean we do not need sustenance. The chronicles of time have taught us the bitter lesson that relief arrives late to the dwellings of the black. We have learned that when the pestilence sweeps across the land, we are the first to fall. We have learned that when the coins of the realm turn to dross, our treasure turns to dust faster than any other people's. We have learned that when the pillars of the great temple crack, we are the ones crushed beneath the falling stone. This is the fourth sign. The invisible agony is still a cross too heavy to bear alone. The absence of a visible scream does not signify the absence of torture. The fact that we draw breath does not mean the venom is not coursing through our veins. It signifies that we have been brutalized so consistently, so thoroughly, that survival has donned the mask of silence. And this, beloved, is the deepest desire of their hearts. They hunger for a suffering that makes no sound. They wish for the tribulation to be normalized. They want us to accept this heavy yoke as simply the natural order of the cosmos. This is the final enchantment of the weapon. This is how the concealment is made perfect. They compel us to believe that our oppression is just the fabric of life itself. But the spell shatters this day. No longer. The evidence stands tall, a monolith undeniable. Now, walk with me back to the Genesis, for this song is as old as the mountains. This is a reverberation of a prophecy spoken thousands of years ago, etched in the stars and the ancient scrolls. To grasp this ancient foretelling is to shatter the illusion of the present moment. It alters the very lens through which you view this time of tribulation. Unfurl your holy scriptures to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. Meditate deeply upon verses 15 through 68 if you wish to see what the Creator told the children of Israel would befall them if they turned their backs on Him. And listen with the ears of your spirit, for the words you are about to ingest mirror the tragic chronicle of Black America with a haunting, supernatural precision. The divine voice thundered through Moses, declaring, "If you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you." And he lists the sorrows. Verse 28, "The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart." Verse 29 prophesies, "And thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind gropeth in darkness." Verse 35 warns of a physical plague. "The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs, with a sore botch that cannot be healed. But attend closely to this, the final seal of the prophecy. Verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, but no man shall buy you. Let that truth sink into the marrow of your soul. Return to the land of bondage in ships, not on foot. This was no natural migration across the sands. It was a journey of wood, sail, and sorrow. Ships, the very vessels of the transatlantic nightmare. Millions of souls, shackled in the belly of the Leviathan, crossing the great deep, perishing in the salt and the dark, delivered to the enemy to be treated as merchandise. But no man shall buy you. Ponder the depth of this mystery. You are so vast in number that the marketplace cannot contain you. The trade in human flesh became so rampant in the Americas that the market was saturated, the value cheapened. That is a specific prophecy piercing the veil of time to describe a specific horror. This is no accident of history. This is not the rolling of dice. This is the unfolding of the divine word. This is God warning his people of the great shadow that would consume them. And that warning manifested in flesh and blood for the children of the diaspora. We were carried to this strange land in ships. We were sold into the house of bondage. We multiplied until we were deemed unwanted surplus. The prophecy lives and breathes in our very veins. Through the shifting sands of time, our bloodline has marched under the heavy gloom of a celestial omen, a foretelling whispered by the Almighty that transcends simple danger. In the sacred text, verse 37 speaks of a horrifying transformation where thou shalt become an object of horror and a proverb amongst the nations. We are the breathing manifestation of that tragic scripture. When the cosmos seeks an image to illustrate true despair, it turns its gaze upon our countenance. When the nations wish to ridicule the concept of struggle, our name is the first summons on their lips. We have morphed into the very definition of the warning, becoming the living, breathing archetype of subjugation that was etched into the stone of verse 39 long ago. Thus, the ancient decree holds that thou shalt be bound to serve the adversaries sent by the divine, laboring in famine, parched with thirst, stripped of raiment, and destitute of all worldly good. Upon thy weary neck he shall place a yoke not of splintering timber, but of cold, unforgiving iron, a weight designed to grind the spirit to powder until the vessel is utterly undone. This terrifying blueprint forms the very foundation of our ancestral journey, a prophetic architecture exposed for those possessing the spiritual sight to perceive the truth. I proclaim that the pulsating rhythms of calamity which began in the scriptural age are reverberating like thunder across our current reality. The old judgment remains awake, vibrant, and fiercely operative. The doom written in the constellations continues to spread its obsidian wings over our heads, and only through this spiritual prism can one truly fathom the encroaching darkness of Project 2026. Perceive this not as some fresh innovation of malice. It is the primordial Leviathan donning a contemporary disguise, extending a bloodline of cruelty that commenced 4 centuries past when our ancestors were shackled in iron. Their divine essence was flayed from their bodies, their spirits tormented, and their existence reduced to mere entries of property in the grand ledger of a merciless overseer. During that interminable night of the soul, no legions rode to the rescue, no worldly thrones interceded, and we remained solitary figures bracing against the crushing gravity of the earth. Yet, how did those titanic souls respond to such absolute negation? They refused to sit in passive silence, waiting for a Messiah who would never materialize from the mist. Abandoning the hope of compassion from their tormentors, they stifled their cries for assistance and commenced the sacred work of weaving structure from the void, carving survival from the bedrock of despair. Within the suffocating confines of the hold and the hut, they forged an inviolable fraternity and birthed the mystic rituals that would serve as the anchor for our everlasting belief. They composed harmonies imbued with secret cartography, hymns that murmured of liberation beneath the moon, and engineered the miraculous, ethereal network celebrated as the Underground Railroad. They navigated treacherous labyrinths through the wild and established a constellation of refuges, identifying those courageous enough to shelter the hunted during the witching hour. They conspired in the gloom to strike against the lash, and many watered the roots of freedom with their own lifeblood, inhaling every breath with the realization that it could be their final exhalation. They embraced the supreme ultimatum, preferring the perilous path of emancipation to the security of chains, electing to perish with honor rather than exist upon their knees. All these wonders were achieved without a single decree of sanction from the crown, without the benediction of the establishment, and absent the faintest glimmer of external salvation. In that fiery furnace, a primordial axiom was distilled and burned into our double helix, pulsing through our arteries and echoing in our racial memory like an eternal war drum. We abide. We continue when the skyline is void of friends. We remain upright when the mountains of opposition are piled as high as the firmament itself. We subsist because persistence is the very frequency of our soul. Yet you must comprehend the colossal weight of this truth. That adamantine resolve, that refusal to break, was never a sign of health. Rather, it was a keloid scar testifying to the abyssal depth of the injury. We were compelled to smith godlike plating for our spirits, solely because we were cast into a demon's inferno. We mastered the traverse of flames merely to withstand the agony. We learned to bloom in earth salted to ensure our demise, to raise citadels from the debris even as the bricks were snatched from our grasp. We summoned the valor to love even when the gavel threatened to sever our kin. And we discovered the breath to chant doxologies when our inner being desired only to wail. This grim design was hardened over 4 centuries of tribulation, imparting the acrid lesson that no legions were cresting the ridge to deliver us. We absorbed the reality that we must be the guardians of our own fate, for the gears of this world were never oiled to dispense equity unto us. This knowledge became so fused with our psyche that when the government finally extended a palm, we regarded it with the suspicion of a beast that knows the trap. This skepticism was not born of hubris nor abundance, but sprang from a deep, hereditary vigilance that murmured alerts into our consciousness. We had been educated too thoroughly in the University of Chains. We knew better than to lean upon a fractured reed that would only puncture the flesh, for life required we trust only our own reflection. Then the epoch of reconstruction broke like a deceptive dawn, whispering alluring vows of 40 acres and a beast of burden to a tired populace. For a transient moment, genuine emancipation felt tangible, the intoxicating vision of soil, of sovereignty, and of a future we could sculpt with our own hands. Yet with brutal speed, the candle was snuffed out, covenants were smashed like porcelain, and the offerings were wrested from our grip, leaving a missive scribed in gore. The verdict was lucid. You were never destined to ascend, never ordained to inherit the land, never permitted to construct a dynasty that could survive the tomb. That momentary taste of autonomy was corrected as a glitch in the system, forcing us to memorize the archaic axiom: the empire may pledge, but it delivers no verity. Privileges bestowed by ink can be obliterated by the blade. Liberties announced in the sunlight can be rescinded in the gloom. And perhaps the most ghastly chapter was indited 130 years hence upon the bustling avenues of a territory named Tulsa, Oklahoma, where melanated genius had raised a wonder. They christened it Black Wall Street, a luminous lighthouse of independent fortune, opulence, and a self-sufficiency that blasphemed the natural hierarchy of the tyrant. We solicited no alms, for we had masoned our own empire. Yet in their covetousness and fury, they summoned fire from the skies until it was reduced to mere cinders. As the constables watched and the magistrates averted their gaze, we received a scorching epiphany. Even when we build in solitude, even when we flourish without their succor, they will incinerate it to the root. The script on the wall burned with horrifying precision. Never deposit your spirit into a mechanism that was calibrated to pulverize your bones. Do not scavenge for justice in corridors constructed upon the skeletons of your forebears, nor anticipate equity from the draftsman of your misery. And never succumb to the hallucination that you can erect a sanctuary of peace within the gut of the Leviathan that was born to devour you. We have walked through the inferno of tribulation, drinking deep from the well of ancient wisdom. We have transmuted our suffering into evolution, enduring that which should have shattered the spirit. And yet, a more profound revelation has taken root within the soil of our collective soul. The grand design was never fractured, nor was it broken. It was crafted with sinister precision to grind against our very being. We came to understand that to inhale the breath of true freedom, we were compelled to exist beyond the iron boundaries of their fabricated reality. Let your spirit drift back to the era of the 1960s, that moment in time when the gale of liberation swept across the weary land like a sanctified, holy wind. Souls of radiant ebony hue marched upon the unforgiving pavement of history, their rhythmic footsteps echoing a thunderous demand for the balancing of the cosmic scales. They cried out to the heavens for justice. They laid claim to the divine birthright that had been stolen at the dawn. They stood as giants, demanding the world bend the knee and acknowledge the eternal spark burning within their chests. And for this sacred audacity, the enforcer's baton struck tender flesh, the iron chains rattled in the dark, and the breath of life was violently stolen from their lungs. The prophets of the age were silenced, one by one, their lights snuffed out by the encroaching shadow. Medgar Evers, fallen in the driveway of destiny; Malcolm X, a flame extinguished too soon; Martin Luther King Jr., returned to the dust of the earth long before his appointed hour. Even the young lion, Fred Hampton, was slain in the quiet of his slumber by the very agents sworn to uphold the law of the land. The Leviathan did not offer us shelter. The Leviathan hunted us down like prey in the night. We were forced to wage a spiritual war for the simple dignity of casting a stone into the urn of democracy. We were compelled to offer our very lives as the exorbitant price for entering the hallowed halls of learning and knowledge. We poured out libations of our own warm blood merely to break bread at a common counter. And when the smoke of the battle cleared, after the martyrdom and the sorrow, we were handed only the crumbs that fell from the master's table. We were granted parchments of protection, fragile scrolls that would be dissolved like sugar in a torrential rain. We received laws of civil standing that would eventually be hollowed out from the inside like a rotting tree. Then the veil was lifted on COINTELPRO. The Bureau had been walking among us as ravenous wolves disguised in the clothing of sheep. The all-seeing eye of the state had been watching from the shadows, sowing the seeds of discord and severing the heads of our leadership with a cold, calculated blade. The great machinery of power had been grinding against our bones from the very beginning of time. Thus, the lesson was etched into our spirit with fire. The empire does not save you. It does not shield you. It actively wars against your very existence. Even when you prostrate yourself for the sake of righteousness, even when you become a martyr for the cause, the system will consume you for your defiance. We could not look to the cold marble halls for our salvation. We understood, with clarity, that we must forge our own arcs to weather the coming storm. We had to become the guardians of our own destiny. We had to weave intricate networks of survival outside the labyrinth that was designed to entrap our souls. Then the wheel of time turned to the pestilence of the 1980s and 90s. A chemical scourge flooded our sanctuaries, while the dark hands of intelligence agencies moved human pieces on the chessboard of trafficking. Our young men were encaged at rates that defied all historical precedent, locked away in the belly of the beast to rot. The sacred family unit was fractured and broken. Whole villages were laid to waste, their foundations crumbled. And what was the decree from the high throne? Mass imprisonment. Then came the rising waters of Hurricane Katrina in the year 2005. Souls were abandoned on rooftops under the gaze of a merciless sun, the innocent starving, the elders left to drift into the abyss of the waters. The hand of the state was paralyzed by a cold apathy. The response was a silence that screamed across the cosmos. The empire demonstrated to the universe that when the skies darken with wrath, lives of color are the first to be discarded into the void. Consider the poisoned chalice of flint. The life-giving waters turned to venom, lead flowing into the veins of the children like a curse. The rulers knew of this treachery. The rulers stood idle, watching the slow decay. The minds of the youth were scarred forever, and the only answer from the throne was a cold, biting indifference. Then came the Great Plague, COVID-19. Our people crossed the River Jordan into the afterlife at twice the rate of others. The shadow of death lingered longest over our doorsteps, a dark spectre that refused to leave. The distribution of healing was weighed on scales that were unjust and unequal. Then came the martyrs, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, a litany of sacred names inscribed in the book of eternal sorrows. The enforcers took the lives of our kin. They brutalized the sacred vessel of the body, and while we wept rivers of tears, they were shielded by the very shield that crushed us into the dust. The answer from the powers that be was a phantom reform, a change in words but not in the spirit of the law. The cycle repeats, eternal and grinding. We are struck down, again and again. We cry out to the heavens for aid. The aid is but a mirage, or it arrives when the body is already cold and still. Or worse, the aid is a gilded cage, designed to pacify the spirit, but never to heal the wound. The prophecy is written in the deep scars of the past. The ancient curse remains active and alive. We are the ones who bleed for the sins of the structure. We have always been the sacrificial lamb. And now, as the horizon darkens with the looming spectre of Project 2026, the assault prepares to quicken its pace. But hear this truth echoing in the wind. To comprehend the grand design is not to accept defeat. To see the silken threads of the web makes us not victims, but awakened warriors of the light. Here lies the riddle that separates the sleeper from the seer. Who feasts at the banquet when we remain blind to the knife held at our throat? Who gathers strength when our tribulation is rendered invisible to the eye? Who fills their coffers with gold when we swallow the lie that we are untouched by the flame? Trace the flow of dominion, follow the river of power, and the fog dissipates instantly before your eyes. Over 100 covens of conservative influence have merged to birth the monstrosity known as Project 2026. 100 legions dedicated to a singular purpose, unraveling every shield we have forged in the fire of our struggle. These are not aimless gatherings of men. They are rooted deep in the bedrock of political dominion, anchored in the ancient stone of power. They are tethered to the false kings who crave the crown of votes but refuse to offer the bread of service to the people. They are in league with the dark architects who seek to slash the granaries without awaking the righteous anger of the masses. Ponder the cold calculus of their strategy. If you sit upon the throne of authority and must withhold sustenance, you face a fork in the road of destiny. The first path is to share the burden among all tribes of the land. The second is to target the famine specifically toward those who would never bow the knee to you, regardless of the cost. If the world believes the illusion that we are unaffected, that we are made of unfeeling stone and suffering is our nature, then starving our villages costs them nothing in the court of power. The town criers in the media remain mute, their tongues tied by the silver of their masters. The electorate turns a blind eye to the tragedy. The gold saved is funneled to the vaults of the wealthy patrons who pull the strings. That is the harvest they seek to reap. Project 2026 grants the rulers permission to ravage our lands while wearing the mask of necessity. They can claim they are pruning the dead branches of government waste. They can preach the gospel of self-reliance while stealing the very tools we need to build. They can frame this devastation as the birth of a new liberty, even as the people hunger in the streets. But the roots of this darkness go far deeper than the eye can see. A heavy veil of sorcery hangs over the earth, a deceptive lullaby carried on the breeze, seeking to persuade the scattered tribes of the diaspora that the approaching tempest is nothing to fear. But the shadow kings tremble at a different reality. They know that if we were to ever truly wake from this slumber, our collective roar would shatter their silence, and our will would crash against their gates like an unstoppable ocean. Bound together, our souls would form an iron legion, a cosmic inevitability that no wall could withstand. Yet, so long as we drift like unanchored spirits in the fog, allowing our sorrow to be weighed as nothing more than smoke, we remain mere granules of sand beneath the gilded boots of tyrants. In this state of phantom existence, the crown looks right through us. We become prey for the state's voracious hounds, hunted in broad daylight with zero repercussions. This is the bitter fruit they gather from the fields of our mute compliance. They use our vanishing as a cloak to conceal their daggers, but one need only follow the stream of silver coins back to its spring to understand the grim mechanics. Witness how the for-profit dungeons grow fat on the captivity of living, breathing spirits. As the obsidian wings of Project 2026 unfurl, extending their claws to criminalize existence and entrap new bodies, the treasuries of the jailers swell with a wealth stained in crimson. When the cells teem with humanity, the peddlers of despair toast to their abundance. Watch closely as the overlords consume our holy places, transmuting the tragedy of our eviction into their glittering towers through the black magic of displacement. The moment our roofs are torn away and we are cast into the wilderness, the vultures descend to pick the carcass clean for mere copper, gilding the skeletal remains of our neighborhoods to auction off to strangers who are blind to our history. Our very banishment serves as the cement for their citadels. The weary pacing of our nomadic feet lays the cobblestones for their avenues of gold. The industrial titans feast upon the very essence of our bones. By severing the covenant of fair wages while strangling the harvest time, they siphon the air from our chests, yet still command us to carry the mountain. Upon the sacrificial stone of our starvation, justice is slaughtered. Our desperate yearning becomes the oil that feeds the furnace of their endless greed. When the physician's hand is pulled back and the antidotes are hidden behind iron bars, the people are stripped of their armor against the pestilence. They are left to drag themselves to the infirmary's threshold only when the cold breath of the reaper is already upon their necks. Though the price of life rises higher than the peaks and the poor drown in unpayable ledgers, the corporate shamans drink deeply from the communal spring, reimbursed handsomely for the very agony they engineered. Spin the prism however you choose, the sorcery is constant. Our weeping and our wounds are chemically altered into their gleaming profit margins. The masters of the plantation grow rich as the roots of the people wither and die. The protectors of the modest crop, who once brought water to the dark-skinned cultivator, have been gagged. Denied the nourishing rain of the small business administration, the honest planter is strangled by the invasive, suffocating ivy of the agrarian monopolies. Acre by acre, the hallowed ground is devoured, until the entire skyline is the property of the spiritless lords of the harvest. Uprooting us from the soil is the foundation upon which their exclusivity stands. As we vanish from the meadows, the systematic mining of our legacy achieves its final form. It does not suffice that we are clad in tatters. They demand that our shreds be spun into their velvet finery. They lust for a reality where the vibrations of our suffering provide the kinetic energy for their wheels of fortune. Yet the most sinister tithe is placed before the ancient statue of supremacy. For this Leviathan to draw breath, it must feast on our felicity. It requires the theatre of our anguish to validate its grotesque dominion. It weaves a poisonous mythology to justify our place in the dirt. For if the secret were whispered that it is the crushing weight of the oppressor's heel holding us down, then the entire edifice would be exposed as a fiend worthy of the inferno. However, if they can persuade the nations that our bleeding is by our own hand, born of inner fragility and a lack of will, then the despot sleeps soundly, and the yoke of guilt remains solely upon our shoulders. This is the genesis of the tall tale regarding our indestructible spines, the folklore of a stamina that possesses no horizon. They hymn our survival, not out of reverence, but to sharpen a cruel argument. If we can traverse the furnace without water, then certainly we have no need for the benevolence of rain. It is the proof they need that the engine is flawless, implying that our hell is a voluntary residence. They murmur that the gates of paradise would open to us if only we broke our bodies just a fraction more. As if our flesh were forged of steel, as if we could soar without the grace of wings. This narrative of resilience is a bombardment against our psyche, a hope weaponized to grind us into dust. It seizes the miracle of our continued respiration and sharpens it into a blade against our throats, framing our disfigurements as badges of valor so they are never obligated to offer a cure. It contorts our desperate adaptation, our capacity to persist in the vacuum, into a perjured witness claiming that our spirits are whole and unbroken. While the command given to us is to suffer, observe the torrent of grace that floods toward the others, golden parachutes for the failing merchants, bounties for the estate owners, and absolution for the hoarders of vast treasures. Even the cancellation of academic ledgers falls like a gentle monsoon, watering primarily the gardens of those who already tread the manicured paths of advantage. Conversely, when we extend our palms in prayer, the portcullis crashes down. In that instant, they begin to sermonize on the virtues of independence, instructing us to derive power from our famine and to ascend the wall without rungs. Harbor no illusions. This duality of justice is not a cosmic accident. It is the granite foundation upon which the spire of domination is erected. The monster demands a fable of separation, a saga where a chosen few are swaddled by the state, while the rest are banished to the hinterlands to battle the frost and the wolves alone. And note with care how this abyss corresponds precisely with the hue of one's flesh. For this was the schematic drafted by the original architects of our grief. For 5 centuries, the holy sanctuary has been tarnished by conspiracy. The podium was utilized to spin a theology of iron, consecrating the manacles with the holy name of the divine. They tutored the prisoner to embrace the lash and look for Eden only after death, all while they constructed their terrestrial empires upon the fractured vertebrae of our toil, preaching stoicism while they gorged at the banquet. Even at this hour, as the ominous storm fronts of Project 2026 amass on the skyline, the grand assemblies of the comfortable hold their peace like the dead. They sing no hymns of resistance against the dismantling of our liberties. They raise no buckler to deflect the arrows aimed at the destitute and the exhausted. The iron doors of the prison thunder shut without a murmur of dissent. And the reason is clear. Those nestled in the velvet of the status quo have no wish to rouse the predator that guarantees their feast. Inside their crystal basilicas, The bishops of affluence announce a hollow revelation that an overflowing purse is the sole evidence of the Creator's smile. By their twisted calculus, the barren palm signifies a deity who has turned his back, labeling destitution not as a tragedy of circumstance, but as a defect in the soul itself. They damn the beggar's plea as a failure of belief, ordering the starving to have faith in the invisible, all while they parade in gilded carriages and erect multi-million-dollar shrines to their own egos. In this majestic fraud, the very countenance of the Messiah has been distorted and molded until it is unrecognizable. The authentic one was a child of the sun, brown of skin, living beneath the crushing boot of a foreign empire. He possessed no treasury, a captive put to death by the establishment. He was a flame in the dark, a radical spirit who possessed the audacity to confront both the temple elders and the imperial governors, rattling the very foundations of their power. Yet the institution drained him of his incendiary nature. They repainted him in their own likeness, pallid, docile, a tender sheep devoid of fangs. They transmuted his radical call into a mandate to bear the whip without a cry, forging the liberator into an instrument of sedation, designed to quiet the oppressed rather than break their chains. If our souls were truly forged in the fire of that radical Nazarene, the revolutionary mystic who overturned the altars of greed and commanded us to exalt the broken, we would never sit in idle prayer. We would be summoning a sacred tempest to sweep the land. We would surge forward like an irresistible celestial tide, a convergence of spirits demanding that the ancient scales of cosmic justice be set right this very moment, waiting for no tomorrow. But if we bend the knee to the tamed and toothless idol, that pale ghost of a god who whispers for us to offer our other cheek to the fist and digest our own agony, then we are trapped in a paralyzed silence. We abandon the holy struggle, casting our eyes toward a promised paradise beyond the firmament, while suffering through a tangible, breathing inferno right here on the soil of the living. In the vacuum of our silence, the powers that be solidify their earthly dominion, hoarding sovereignty and gold, while the wails of the crushing downtrodden dissolve into the uncaring abyss. They gorge themselves on the harvest of stagnation, draping their apathy in the velvet robes of divine providence. But I have come to deconstruct the spiritual ramparts they have erected to guard this fractured reality. My purpose is to fracture every shimmering mirage they present, for I can already hear the murmurs of their defense coalescing in the twilight before a single word leaves their lips. I perceive the counter-arguments crystallizing in the psyche of the privileged. They will sing hymns, extolling our endurance, canonizing us as the unbreakable vessels of history. They will spin mythologies about our phoenix-like ability to rise from the dust, praising our spines of iron, only to wield that very fortitude as a justification to refuse us an outstretched hand. But listen closely to the truth reverberating from the deep places. This heralded resilience is neither a celestial superpower nor a beatific gift of grace bestowed from on high. What you call resilience is merely the calcified scar tissue of the spirit. We are this impenetrable only because the world has been this merciless, battering us until we were forced to smelt armor from the raw ore of our own trauma. We have been regarded as fleeing shadows rather than luminous souls, compelled to engineer mechanisms of survival that border on sorcery just to inhale another breath. Meditate deeply on what you are actually venerating when you laud black resilience. You are, in essence, cheering for our capacity to endure the mechanics of a torture chamber without expiring. You are standing in awe of our ability to blossom in a garden that was deliberately salted, scorched, and seeded for our absolute and total annihilation. You are celebrating the miraculous defiance that allows us to weave families and kinship while clutching the terrifying cognition that these bonds could be severed by the gales of injustice at any moment. You applaud our audacity to love in the teeth of extinction, Yet I tell you, this is not a virtue to be paraded in a festival of triumph. It is the smoking gun of a transgression so colossal, so archaic, that the only method to veil the horror is to feign that the victims are hewn from unfeeling stone, yet the shards of our shattering litter the landscape. If you were to peer into the collective psyche of the people, you would witness the mental torment, the heavy storm clouds of melancholy, the anxiety, and the wounds that bleed without skin to show them. You would see the ancestral poltergeist of post-traumatic stress and hearts hammering under the crush of hypertension, bodies trembling from the ceaseless frequency of imminent peril. You would witness our children bearing the burdens of ancient elders, acting out in dissonance because they have tasted the gall of bitterness before they were mature enough to comprehend the flavor of trauma. We are not unbroken. We are traumatized entities navigating a landscape sown with mines, and there is a chasm of difference between true healing and the mere act of not dying. The sentinels of the gate will protest, but behold the aid they are given, gesturing to the pitiful scraps of welfare, food stamps, and housing vouchers as evidence that the kingdom provides for its subjects. But this is a grand illusion, a veil drawn over the mind's eye, and here is the spiritual reality that lies beneath the surface. Firstly, these offerings from the state are but a single tear in the ocean we are owed. We laid the bedrock of this entire empire with our uncompensated sweat for 400 long years. Every penny of assistance is merely the accumulated interest on a karmic debt that has never been settled. It is reparations wearing a mask, not charity bestowed. Contemplate the offering known as SNAP, averaging a meager $6 a day. Attempt to sustain a temple of the Holy Spirit on such a starvation wage. It is an impossibility. One is coerced into consuming the cheapest toxins, processed fillers, and hollow sustenance that slowly corrodes the sacred vessel of the body. Furthermore, this fragile lifeline is under perpetual siege, threatened by the shears of legislators who tighten the eligibility like a hangman's noose. There is an eternal murmur of severing it entirely, with politicians sermonizing from their ivory towers that the destitute must simply levitate by pulling on their own bootstraps. They attach a heavy millstone of shame to the act of survival, while the titans of corporate America are caught by golden parachutes whenever they stumble from the heights. The rivers of prosperity flow upward to the landed gentry and the billionaires through the secret channels of tax havens, while loans for the opulent are forgiven as if by some dark magic. The treasury flung its gates wide during the plague. Yet, when the downtrodden petition for relief, it is suddenly branded a handout that cultivates sloth and dependency. Suddenly, the homily shifts to the virtues of independence, while the waiting list for Section 8 sanctuary stretches into a timeline measured in years, not days. Souls languish in limbo for eons seeking a haven, and families are cast out into the howling wilderness long before succor ever arrives. Children mature on the unforgiving pavement, waiting for a salvation that never manifests. There is no apologetic that can justify calling these crumbs of survival a feast. They will attempt to persuade you that if our agony were truly profound, the avenues would be choked with the roar of our rebellion. They interpret our silence not as a peace, but as forensic evidence that the pain is a fabrication of the mind. But this is a labyrinth designed to entrap us regardless of the path we tread. For if we protest with serenity and dignity, we are rendered spectral and invisible. Recall the prophet Kaepernick, who knelt in silent reverence. He was excommunicated, his calling obliterated, teaching us that peaceful dissent is a heresy in their gaze. Yet if we raise our voices in thunder and fire, we are stigmatized as agents of chaos, and the narrative shifts to broken glass rather than broken spirits. We are cast as the antagonists in our own tragedy, and whether we whisper our truth or scream it to the heavens, the crushing gravity remains unchanged. Thus we channel our resistance into the ethereal, We pour our protest into the ink of our scriptures, the rhythm of our hymns, and the canvas of our visions. We protest by the simple act of drawing breath and persisting in a reality that was architected to scrub our existence from the annals of history. We defy them by refusing to vanish quietly into the twilight, by keeping our sagas alive in the year 2026. But they refuse to tally this as valid resistance. And when the volcano of our spirit finally erupts in visible defiance, they distort the parable to justify the very violence we sought to transcend. They wield the chaos of these turbulent times as a dark aegis to shield the tightening coils of the great Leviathan. With twisted tongues, they warp the saga of our days to sanctify a heavier, more crushing yoke of tyranny upon the necks of the people. It is a game rigged by unseen hands, a labyrinth without exit, crafted by wicked architects to snare the very spirit. This grand fabrication stands as perhaps the most lethal venom they drip, drop by drop, into the well of our collective consciousness. They chant the hollow mantra that the iron chains were shattered 160 years ago. They implore us to bury the spectral ghosts of yesterday, commanding us to avert our gaze from history and stare only at the shimmering mirage of the now. Yet, the Holy Scripture unveils a truth far more obsidian to those blessed with the eyes to see. Turn the gaze of your heart to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 46. And there it is written, "They shall cling to you and your seed as a sign and a wonder, a testament of agony for all eternity, forever." Not merely for a century of weeping and gnashing of teeth, nor for 200 years, but unto the very dissolving of the age. The curse courses through the veins of the bloodlines. The shockwaves of ancient trauma ripple still. The prophecy breathes, a living thing walking amongst us. The physical shackles fell to the earth in 1865, yet the demon merely shed its skin in 1877. The era of visible bondage faded, only for the colossal shadow of Jim Crow to rise instantly, darkening the land in its stead. For 100 long years, that shadow reigned with absolute dominion, a century of codified separation, of hatred bound by law, and violence sanctified by the strike of the gavel. Though the laws of the Crow crumbled in the 1960s, the red lines were etched upon the maps in the 1930s, extending their curse well into the 1980s. These invisible walls stood as fortress gates, barring black families from the sanctuary of ownership. It severed the tender roots of prosperity before they could ever take hold in the soil. It constructed the very ghettos and cleaved the cities that stand as monolithic monuments to separation this very day. More than 50 years of systematic denial birthed the tribulation of housing we witness in this hour. Then, the beast morphed once more, birthing the era of mass captivity in the 1980s. The iron doors of the cage are still slamming shut with thunderous finality. Millions of black souls bound in chains, lineages fractured beyond repair, entire villages laid to waste. This tragedy unfolds in the very breath of this present moment. Thus, when they whisper the words "move on," they are in truth demanding that you bow your neck in submission to the yoke of unending tribulation. Cease your testimony regarding the torment you endure. Silence your cry for righteousness. Submit to the machine that grinds your bones to dust. Yet the word declares the curse is everlasting. The scroll of ancient prophecy remains unfurled. The crushing weight of the oppressor has not been lifted from our weary shoulders. They will weave a beguiling tale of equal footing, claiming the playing field is now level. They will parade the few who ascended the treacherous mountain and proclaim, "Behold, the mechanism is just." They will hiss with forked tongues that if others stumble in the shadowed valley, it is due solely to the frailty of their own stride. But the agenda known as Project 2026 stands as the undeniable evidence of their profound deceit. This plan, is the literal dismantling of hope's ladder, rung by rung. The remediation of past wrongs is being scrubbed from the ledgers of history. This is a deliberate barricade across the path to equity. Programs of diversity and inclusion are being torn down, stone by cold stone. This is the calculated destruction of a fair chance. The guardians of civil rights are being stripped of their swords and shields. It is a crusade waged against the very concept of equality. And they commit these acts under the glaring light of the high sun. They cloak not their intentions in shadow. They are brazen, proud in their dismantling of the good. They have inscribed a tome of 900 pages, detailing with surgical precision how they shall snuff out the flickering light of opportunity. They are erasing the lifelines that sustain us. They are dissolving the shields of the vulnerable. They are shattering the mirrors of accountability into dust. The notion of an equal start is but a phantom, a fable whispered to children. They spin this yarn to make us believe that our suffering is born of our own ineptitude. Yet the foundations were never laid for us to stand tall. The ground was cursed beneath our feet. The architecture was drafted for our inevitable collapse. This is the ultimate deception, the most poisonous serpent slithering in the garden. They will try to soothe you with honeyed words, claiming this is merely the dance of politics, a simple divergence of policy. They will swear upon their altars that it has no color. But know this truth. Every stone turned in America has hidden a racial truth since the fateful year of 1619. Every decree carries the heavy weight of blood and lineage. Every statute lands with a different gravity upon different soils. This is not the role of chance. This is the hand of the dark architect. The grand design of 2026 carefully avoids the name of the black man. It does not speak the words of targeting in a plain tongue, hoping to mask its true, malevolent intent behind a veil of silence. But when you erase the corrective measures of the past, you are striking down the only shield raised against centuries of accumulated hate. When you sever the gold from the schools of the poor, you are starving the minds of communities that are dark of skin, condemning them to famine. When you banish the watchmen of civil rights, you invite the wolves of discrimination back into the fold to feast upon the innocent. That the agenda of 2026 lacks the explicit language of race does not render it neutral. It renders it a stealth predator, hunting in the tall grass. It buries the venom deep within the flesh, hidden from sight. It grants them the cloak of denial, yet the poison works its lethality all the same. The devastation is visible to the spiritual eye. The raising of black sanctuaries is real. From the vantage of the divine, this is nothing less than a war of souls. As it is written in Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 12. For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood. There is a spectral depth, an abyss, to this crushing weight. There are principalities that feast upon our anguish. There are dark currents seeking our total erasure from the earth. There is no divide between the law of man and the spirit. This struggle has forever been about keeping our heads beneath the rising waters. It has always been about dominion, power, and the subjugation of the spirit. And it has always borne the mark of race, for the ziggurat of this world is built upon the bones of a racial hierarchy. You have journeyed deep into this revelation, and I must speak truth to your spirit now. We stand trembling at the crossroads of destiny. This is the hour where the luxury of neutrality dissolves like morning mist before the burning sun. This is the instant where your soul must declare its allegiance in the eternal annals of history. The pen is in your hand. My spirit speaks to every soul witnessing this vision, to every black heart that has been commanded to swallow its grief and silence its song, to every white soul told to wash its hands of ancient guilt, to every brown spirit told this battle belongs to another tribe, not their own. To every soul of mixed heritage told to carve themselves in two, this prophecy is for you. You either walk in the blazing light of truth, or you aid the suffocating darkness of the lie. The grey lands have vanished into the void. There is no sanctuary of indifference when the people groan under the weight. To remain silent is to sign the death warrant of the soul. To remain motionless while the world bleeds is not merely negligence, it is an active communion with the dark. To whisper this cross is not mine to bear is to sow your very spirit into the grand tapestry of tyranny. Let us shatter the mist of uncertainty that clouds the mind. If you dare to utter that our lineage walks unscathed through this gathering tempest, you act as one whose eyes have been gouged by folly or whose soul has been courted by malice. Your spiritual sight is either bound by a veil so thick it eclipses the obvious, or far more tragic, you gaze upon the wreckage of our people with a heart calcified into cold, unfeeling stone. Whatever the root of your blindness, this sacred decree is etched into the ether for your spirit to absorb. Rise from your deep slumber, heed the celestial trumpet, and witness the stark, unvarnished reality standing tall before you. To those of my own bloodline who lounge in the ivory towers of transient comfort, proclaiming, "I am secure. Therefore the hurricane concerns me not, know that my voice hunts for you across the vast, silent void. The gold, weighting your pockets, possesses no power to cleanse the collective anguish of our ancestry. The silken softness of your bed offers no fortress against the crushing judgment of your complicit silence. A solitary triumph grants no divine license to avert your gaze while the village turns to ash. Summon the ancient fire inscribed in the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 15, which roars across the centuries. Choose this very son whom you shall serve. Yet, as for my kin and my house, we shall bow our knees only to the Almighty Creator. Here stands your crossroads, the divine instant of irrevocable choice. You must cast your lot into the fires of destiny. It is a spiritual impossibility to pledge fealty to two warring sovereigns. One cannot dance in the light while embracing the shadows of the abyss. One cannot champion the cause of righteousness while breaking bread with tyranny. You cannot serve the architect of life and the machine built to grind his creation into dust. Let this wisdom permeate the marrow of your bones. The path of absolute veracity extracts a heavy toll from the traveler. The road of silence seduces with ease. The highway of conformity is paved with the treacherous stones of comfort. It requires no exertion to claim the war belongs to another. Yet, the price of such hollow tranquility is the very essence of your eternal soul, the forfeiture of the only liberation that matters. You barter your honor for a fleeting moment of peace. To embrace the truth is to walk willingly into the refining fire of discomfort, to invite the universe to scrutinize the foundation upon which you stand. You may find yourself severed, a branch cut from the tree of those who cling to the grand illusion. The pillars of your career may tremble and fracture under the immense gravity of your convictions. The world may brand you a zealot, a sower of discord, or an ingrate. Yet, rising from the ashes of their condemnation, you shall hold the indestructible diamond of spiritual integrity. You possess the unshakable, knowing that you stood rooted like an ancient oak in the gale. You forge a blood oath with the remnant, the sacred fellowship of those who refuse to bend the knee to idols. You inherit a celestial vigor, a cosmic power that surges only when a human spirit beats in perfect rhythm with the justice of the divine. The ancient scrolls, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3, whisper a warning. The prudent see the danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. The peril does not lurk in the shadows, it looms on the horizon like a monolith. Project 2026 is unveiled for every eye to witness. The edicts are carved in stone, The devastation is prophesied. A soul steeped in wisdom perceives this omen and fortifies the spirit. This is my plea to your eternal core. This is the demand placed upon your destiny by the ancestors. Decide in this breath, before the sun dips below the world's edge, not in some nebulous future, this very hour. Elect the truth. Embrace the sword of justice. Stand shoulder to shoulder with your kin. Understand that this is no balm for your wounded vanity. This is not a theater for hollow gestures or the performance of virtue for an audience of sleepwalkers. This is the forging of a rebellion of the soul. This is the alchemy of divine transformation. This is about ensuring your footprint leaves a searing mark upon the sands of eternity. If destiny has placed a scepter of influence in your grip, wield it with fury. If you guide minds, illuminate the darkness. If you shepherd a flock, let righteousness thunder from the pulpit like a storm. If you govern, become the iron shield of your tribe. If you rear the next generation, feed them the raw, unadulterated bread of honesty. If you paint or sing, let your art scream the reality until the walls shake. Whatever station you occupy in this realm, let it become an altar to the truth. And if you believe yourself powerless, know that you possess a hidden, dormant might waiting to be unleashed. You hold the thunder of your voice. You possess the ancestral strength of your village. You wield your bloodline, your digital reach, and the sacred capacity to weave slumbering souls together. Deploy these spiritual weapons. We are not at play. This is no mere exchange of pleasantries. This is the precarious balance between existence and oblivion, the choice between soaring chains or broken shackles. This is the great divide between final vindication and eternal crushing. This is the moment of waking or the descent into an endless, narcotic coma. Choose your fate with trembling hands. If these words strike a resonant chord within your soul, you must transcend stillness and embrace kinetic motion. Leave a mark in the scrolls below. Inscribe a single, powerful utterance. Write, "We are affected. Nothing more is needed." Signal to me that the frequency has been received. Signal to the digital gods that the people are stirring from their sleep. Demonstrate to the prophets of our time that you walk within the awakened ranks. Yet, do not halt at the gates. Disseminate this vision across the ether immediately, like a holy fire. Pass it to every melanated soul who has been commanded to swallow their agony in silence. Send it coursing through your lineage. Let it echo through the hallowed halls of your sanctuary. Summon a brother or sister in the comments below. One who slumbers deep in the illusion, one whose spirit is starving for this specific revelation. Invoke their name, piercing the heavy veil of anonymity. Make it tangible and real. You are no mere spectator in the stands. You are a combatant in a war for the spirit realm. Each word you type strikes a hammer blow against the wall of lies. Each transmission you send seeds the blinding light of truth. This is the very unity that terrifies the forces of darkness. They tremble in their strongholds at the thought of your communion. They dread the wildfire of realization jumping from soul to soul, igniting the night. They fear the collective awakening more than death itself. Join this legion immediately. Ignite every signal fire so you miss no decree from the heavens. This beacon is your wellspring of reality, the unfiltered, perilous, chain-breaking truth. This is your sacred charge to keep. Impart this wisdom to your inner circle. Do not merely forward a link. Ignite a fierce dialogue. Disturb the peace of the complacent. That friction is the spark that ignites evolution. Ease is the lullaby sung to the oppressed to keep them docile. Agitation is the alarm bell of the free. Speak it to your kin. Proclaim it to your congregation. Confront your spiritual leader. If the pulpit remains mute regarding Project 2026, that sanctuary aids the oppressor. Warn your colleagues before the gates close. Instruct your offspring. Arm them with the sword of veracity. Do not permit them to mature under a canopy of sweet falsehoods. Do not let them internalize the blame for their own wounds. You stand at the ultimate fork in the road. You may retreat into the fog of slumber, or you may stride boldly into the radiant light of your divine purpose. You can become a vessel of pure light. You can join the ranks of the awakened. Let us bow our heads in preparation. But know this, what follows is no gentle whisper, but a spiritual battle cry that shakes the earth. Attend to this moment, for it is no mere speech but a celestial mandate, a roaring edict of metaphysical warfare launched against the encroaching dusk that seeks to devour the light. O timeless one, Yahweh, the breath of life, to the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the great breaker of chains, who split the sea for Moses. We stand before your sapphire throne this day, not trembling like paupers in the dust, but rising tall with the regal bearing of sons and daughters, claiming the sacred inheritance sworn to our bloodline. Your living word, etched into the fabric of the cosmos in Psalm 37, verse 28, vibrates with an eternal vow. For the Creator cherishes judgment, and he shall never, throughout the ages, abandon those who walk in his holy faithfulness. For 400 long years we have traversed the treacherous valley of the shadow of death, clutching the torch of faith. We have remained unbreakable beneath the heavy iron of bondage, the scorching flames of separation, the cruelty of the overseer, and the soulless, cold dungeons of modern captivity. Our voices pierce the firmament, crying out, "How long, O sovereign ruler of the stars? How long shall the balances remain tipped in favor of darkness, permitting the corrupt to thrive, while the pure of heart endure their torment in agonizing silence? Abba, Divine Father, we hereby unleash a total spiritual offensive against every architecture of tyranny designed to suffocate the breath of your people. We bind with chains of fire every dark spirit of supremacy that dares to exalt its pride above the majesty of your handiwork. We seize every invisible principality, stoking the infernos of hatred and division. By the supreme authority of the true Messiah, the bronze-skinned, sorrow-bearing, revolutionary Nazarene who walked among the outcast, we order these malevolent forces to halt their machinery this very instant. We speak destruction to the foundations of modern Babylon, commanding the pillars of every inequitable system to disintegrate into ash before our gaze. Let a grand, spiritual renaissance sweep across the nations like a hurricane of holy wind. Awaken every sleeping spirit from its coma. Let the blinding veils dissolve from every eye. We summon a sacred convergence, weaving the hearts of your children into an impenetrable tapestry of unity, casting all strife and separation into the bottomless void. Let the chaotic noise of brother fighting brother be hushed into an eternal silence. We decree absolute, irreversible emancipation over the bloodlines of those who knew the lash, declaring that the prisoners are now, and for all eternity, released from their chains. The yoke is shattered. The iron fetters are ground into formless dust. We stand firmly grounded in the triumph that was sealed the moment you vanquished the grave and conquered death itself upon the tree. We lay hold of our celestial birthright as chosen vessels of light. Justice is no longer a distant dream, but our immediate horizon, and we shall behold its manifestation arriving with the swiftness of lightning. We lock these decrees in the heavens by the resonant, all-powerful name of Yeshua, Jesus the Anointed, the King who rules over all monarchs. And with a singular voice, the entire universe vibrates in agreement. Amen. Amen. Let it be written in the stars. Go forth and march upon this reality. Stride in the colossal magnitude of your power and the infinite vastness of your freedom. You are the elected ones. You are the cherished ones. You are the liberated. Amen.